The ground shook beneath Bridget Aldridge's boots as the steam locomotive roared into Copper Creek Station, bringing with it a cloud of dust that swirled around the wooden platform like a miniature cyclone. The year was 1874, and after 5 long years of absence, she had finally returned to the place she once called home, a place where no one would be waiting for her, or so she thought. Bridget adjusted her worn leather satchel and smoothed down her plain blue calico dress, a stark contrast to the fashionable attire she'd grown accustomed to in Boston. At 23, she carried herself with a quiet dignity that belied the turmoil inside her. The telegram that had brought her back west had been brief but devastating. "Father dying. Come if you wish to make peace." It was signed by her older brother, Thomas, who had never approved of her leaving in the first place. As passengers disembarked around her, Bridget stood frozen, gathering courage. Copper Creek had grown in her absence. New storefronts lined the main street, and unfamiliar faces bustled about. She drew a deep breath of the dry desert air, so different from the dampness of the eastern seaboard. "Miss Aldridge." The voice startled her. Bridget turned to find a tall man in a dust-covered denim jacket and well-worn Stetson regarding her with an intensity that made her step back. "I'm Declan O'Malley," he said, removing his hat to reveal sun-bleached brown hair. "Your brother sent me to fetch you." Bridget studied him suspiciously. His face was weathered by sun and wind, placing him somewhere in his late 20s. His eyes, a startling blue against his tanned skin, held a look of recognition that unsettled her. "Thomas sent you?" she asked, unable to hide her surprise. "I wasn't expecting anyone." A brief smile crossed Declan's face. "He didn't want you walking all the way out to the ranch, not with coyotes and bandits about." He gestured toward a wagon at the end of the platform. "I've got my wagon ready if you're willing to trust a stranger." Bridget hesitated. There was something familiar about Declan O'Malley, though she couldn't place him. "Have we met before, Mr. O'Malley?" His smile widened, revealing a small dimple in his right cheek. "Not properly, Miss Aldridge. But I've been waiting to meet you for a very long time." Before she could question his cryptic response, he reached for her satchel. "May I?" Reluctantly, she handed it over and followed him to the wagon. As they left the station, Bridget felt the eyes of the townsfolk following her. 5 years hadn't been long enough for them to forget the scandal of her departure. "How is my father?" she asked as the wagon jolted onto the dirt road leading out of town. Declan kept his eyes on the road. "Holding on, but barely. Doc Simmons doesn't think he'll last the week." Bridget nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. She hadn't spoken to her father since the night she'd fled Copper Creek. Their last words had been harsh, unforgiving on both sides. "And my brother," she ventured. "Thomas is." "Thomas." Declan's hands tightened on the reins. "He's been running the ranch since your father took ill, doing his best." The implication that Thomas's best might not be good enough hung in the air between them. "You know my family well?" Bridget asked, studying his profile. Declan nodded. "I bought the neighboring property 3 years ago. Your father was good to me when others weren't, taught me a lot about ranching." "And what did Thomas teach you?" she asked, knowing her brother's tendency toward prejudice. A wry smile crossed Declan's face. "To watch my back." They rode in silence for a while, the rhythmic clopping of hooves punctuated by the occasional call of a hawk circling overhead. The landscape was both familiar and strange to Bridget, the rolling hills dotted with scrub brush, the distant mountains hazy in the afternoon heat. It was nothing like the manicured gardens and crowded streets of Boston, yet something in her chest loosened at the sight. "They call you lost, you know," Declan said suddenly, breaking the silence. Bridget stiffened. "Excuse me, in town," he clarified. "They call you Lost Bridget." Your family, too, they speak of you as if you're gone forever, especially your mother. A sharp pain lanced through Bridget's heart. My mother made her feelings clear when I left. Declan slowed the wagon as they approached a creek crossing. People say things they don't mean when they're hurt. You seem to know a lot about a family you've only known for 3 years, Bridget observed coolly. He guided the horses carefully through the shallow water before responding. I listen more than most. Bridget turned away, watching the landscape roll by. And what else do people say about me, Mr. O'Malley? That you ran off with a traveling salesman, that you became an actress in New York, that you married a wealthy banker in Boston. He glanced at her left hand, notably bare of a wedding ring. Folks like their stories around here. And which do you believe? She challenged. None of them, he replied simply. I figured you had your reasons for leaving, same as I had mine for coming west. Bridget regarded him with new interest. And what were those reasons, Mr. O'Malley? A fresh start. His eyes met hers briefly. Same as most folks who come to these parts. As they crested a hill, the Aldridge ranch came into view. The two-story farmhouse stood just as Bridget remembered, though the white paint had grayed with age and the surrounding cottonwoods had grown taller. Smoke curled from the chimney. Despite the warm day, her father always felt cold when he was ill. A figure emerged onto the porch as they approached, tall and straight-backed, unmistakably Thomas. Brace yourself, Declan murmured as he brought the wagon to a halt in the yard. Thomas Aldridge descended the steps slowly, his face an expressionless mask. At 30, he looked older than Bridget remembered, harder, with new lines etched around his mouth and eyes. You came, he said, his voice flat as Bridget climbed down from the wagon. I came, she agreed, standing tall despite the urge to shrink from his cold gaze. Thomas nodded curtly before turning to Declan. Obliged for fetching her, O'Malley. Glad to help, Declan replied, tipping his hat. To Bridget's surprise, he didn't leave immediately. Instead, he retrieved her satchel and carried it to the porch. Your mother's inside, Thomas told Bridget. Well, you'll see. Bridget felt a flicker of apprehension. Is she ill as well, not in body? Thomas's jaw tightened. Go on in, Father's asking for you. As Bridget moved toward the house, Declan called after her. Miss Aldridge, she turned back, questioning. I'll be by tomorrow to check on things, he said, holding her gaze a moment too long. If that's all right. Before Bridget could respond, Thomas cut in. No need, O'Malley. Family business now. Something passed between the two men, a current of tension that Bridget couldn't decipher. All the same, Declan said evenly, not breaking eye contact with Thomas. I promised your father I'd look in on him. Thomas's mouth thinned to a hard line, but he didn't object further. With a final nod to Bridget, Declan climbed back into his wagon and set off down the drive. Bridget watched him go, an inexplicable sense of loss washing over her. He's taken a shine to you already, Thomas observed coldly. Didn't take long. Bridget faced her brother. He was merely being kind. Kind, Thomas repeated with a bitter laugh. O'Malley doesn't do anything without reason. Remember that. Before Bridget could ask what he meant, the front door creaked open. Her mother stood in the doorway, a ghost of the vibrant woman Bridget remembered. Martha Aldridge had aged a decade in 5 years, her once auburn hair now streaked liberally with gray, her face lined with grief. Mama, Bridget whispered, taking a step forward. Martha Aldridge stared at her youngest child as if seeing a phantom. Bridget, her voice cracked. Is it really you? It's me, Mama. Martha's hand fluttered to her throat. We never thought. They said you were lost to us forever. I was never lost, Bridget said softly. I just went away for a while. Martha's eyes welled with tears. Your father needs to see you. Now, before, she broke off, unable to finish. Bridget followed her mother into the house. the familiar scent of beeswax and pine soap washing over her. Little had changed in the main living area, the same worn sofa, the same faded curtains, the same family Bible on the side table. But a heaviness hung in the air, the unmistakable pall of approaching death. Martha led her upstairs to the master bedroom. The curtains were drawn, casting the room in shadow, but Bridget could make out her father's form on the bed. James Aldridge had always been a big man, broad-shouldered and barrel-chested. The figure beneath the quilt seemed shrunken, diminished. "James," Martha said softly, "she's here. Bridget's come home." The man on the bed stirred, turning his head toward the door. "Bridget?" His voice was a rasp, barely recognizable. Bridget moved to the bedside, her heart constricting at the sight of him. His once ruddy face was ashen, his cheeks sunken. But his eyes, those piercing gray eyes that could quell a ranch hand with a single glance, were still alert, still burning with the same fierce intelligence she remembered. "Hello, Father," she said, surprised at the steadiness of her voice. James Aldridge studied her face for a long moment. "You look like your grandmother," he finally said. "Same stubborn chin." Bridget gave a watery smile. "So you always said." He beckoned her closer with a trembling hand. When she sat on the edge of the bed, he reached up to touch her cheek. "I said many things I wish I could take back." "As did I," Bridget admitted, covering his hand with hers. "Are you well, truly?" His gaze searched her face. "I am. I've been teaching at a girls' school in Boston, literature and composition." A faint smile touched his lips. "Always had your nose in a book, even as a little one." Martha stood by the door, silently weeping. Thomas was nowhere to be seen. "I need to speak with Bridget alone," James said to his wife. "Please, Martha." Martha nodded and withdrew, closing the door softly behind her. James struggled to sit up, and Bridget quickly arranged the pillows behind him. "I don't have much time left," he said bluntly, "and there are things you need to know." "Father, you shouldn't tax yourself," he waved away her concern. "Did O'Malley bring you from the station?" Surprised by the question, Bridget nodded. "Yes, he said you sent him. Good, he's a good man, despite what your brother thinks." James paused, gathering strength. "Things aren't right here, Bridget, haven't been for some time." A chill crept up Bridget's spine. "What do you mean?" "The ranch is failing. Thomas has made bad decisions. Took loans he couldn't repay." James's eyes clouded with pain, whether physical or emotional, Bridget couldn't tell. "I was too sick to stop him." "Surely it can be fixed," Bridget said. "We could sell some of the land, or it's worse than that." James gripped her hand with surprising strength. "Thomas has gotten himself mixed up with Harold Winters and his gang." Bridget paled. Even in Boston, she'd heard of the Winters gang, notorious cattle rustlers who didn't hesitate to kill anyone who stood in their way. How? Why would he do such a thing? Pride? Desperation? James closed his eyes briefly. When the bank threatened foreclosure, Winters offered a way out. Now Thomas is in too deep to walk away. "Does the sheriff know?" James gave a bitter laugh that dissolved into a coughing fit. When he recovered, he said, "Sheriff Blake is in Winters's pocket. No help there." "Then what can be done?" Bridget asked, feeling helpless. "That's why I sent for you." James's grip tightened. "You were always the clever one, and you're the only one Thomas can't intimidate." Bridget shook her head in disbelief. "You want me to stop Thomas? To somehow save the ranch? Father, I've been gone for 5 years." "I don't know the first thing about—" "Not alone," James interrupted. "O'Malley will help you, Mr. O'Malley. But I just met him." A knowing look crossed her father's face. "Did he tell you he's been waiting for you?" Bridget's breath caught. "He said something like that, yes." "How would he even know me?" "Because I've told him about you. Every day since he arrived." James relaxed back against the pillows, suddenly looking exhausted. "He's been helping me gather evidence against Winters, evidence that could put him away for good." Why would Mr. O'Malley risk himself for our family? James's eyes drifted closed. That's his story to tell. But trust him, Bridget. If anyone can help you save this family, what's left of it, it's Declan O'Malley. Father, promise me, James insisted, his eyes flying open with a sudden intensity. Promise you'll try to save the ranch, for your mother's sake, if not for mine. Bridget hesitated only a moment. I promise. Relief washed over James's face. Good girl. His hand relaxed in hers. There's a strongbox in my office, behind the portrait of your grandmother. The key is under the loose floorboard by my desk. Everything you need is there. Bridget nodded, committing his words to memory. Now go, James said, his voice fading. Let me rest. We'll talk again tomorrow. Bridget leaned down to kiss his forehead, alarmed at the heat of his skin. Rest well, Father. As she turned to leave, James called after her. Bridget, she paused at the door. Yes, I was wrong to let you go, he said simply. I've regretted it every day since. Tears stung Bridget's eyes. I'm here now, she whispered. Outside in the hallway, Bridget found her mother waiting, twisting her apron in her hands. How is he? Martha asked anxiously. Tired but lucid, Bridget assured her. He's resting now. Martha nodded, then suddenly pulled Bridget into a fierce embrace. I'm so sorry, she whispered against Bridget's hair, for everything, for not standing by you. Bridget returned the hug, feeling the frailty of her mother's body. It's in the past, Mama. Martha drew back, wiping her eyes. You must be tired from your journey. I've prepared your old room. Bridget followed her mother down the hallway to the small bedroom she'd once shared with her sister Catherine, now married and living in Denver. The room was exactly as she'd left it, the patchwork quilt on the bed, the small bookshelf filled with her favorite novels, the faded blue curtains at the window. I'll let you rest, Martha said, hesitating at the door. Supper will be at 6, same as always. Alone, Bridget sank onto the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the day's revelations. Her father dying, her brother involved with criminals, her family ranch on the verge of ruin, and a mysterious neighbor who claimed to have been waiting for her. It was like something from one of the dime novels she'd secretly devoured as a girl. She moved to the window and looked out across the ranch. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the paddocks and outbuildings. In the distance, she could see ranch hands moving cattle toward the north pasture. And beyond them, just visible on the next ridge, stood another ranch house newer than the Aldridge place, with a red roof that caught the sunlight. Declan O'Malley's ranch, she presumed. What was his role in all this? Why had her father placed so much trust in a relative newcomer? And why did he look at her with such familiarity when they'd never met before? Bridget turned away from the window, determined to find answers. She would start with her father's office and the mysterious strongbox. The main floor was quiet as Bridget descended the stairs. Thomas was nowhere to be seen, and her mother was presumably tending to her father. The door to James Aldridge's office stood slightly ajar. Bridget slipped inside, closing it softly behind her. The room smelled of leather and pipe tobacco, comforting scents that brought an unexpected lump to her throat. Her father's massive oak desk dominated the space, its surface covered with ledgers and correspondence. Behind it hung the portrait of her grandmother, a stern-faced woman in black, her resemblance to Bridget unmistakable. Carefully, Bridget moved the portrait aside, revealing a small wall safe. As her father had said, there was a loose floorboard near the desk. She pried it up and found a small brass key wrapped in a handkerchief. The safe opened with a soft click. Inside was a metal strongbox, which she removed and placed on the desk. The key fit its lock perfectly. The box contained several items: a stack of letters tied with twine, a leather pouch that jingled with coins, a deed of some sort, and a journal bound in red leather. Bridget reached for the journal first, opening it to find her father's familiar handwriting. It was dated 3 years earlier, around the time Declan O'Malley had arrived in Copper Creek. The first entry caught her eye immediately. O'Malley arrived today. He's younger than I expected, but his eyes are old. He asked about Bridget straight away. I wasn't surprised after all, that's why he's here. Bridget's breath caught. What did that mean? How had Declan O'Malley known about her before arriving in Copper Creek? She flipped through more pages, finding scattered references to meetings with O'Malley, concerns about Thomas's gambling debts, and increasingly worried notes about Harold Winters. But nothing that explained the connection between her and Declan. The sound of boots in the hallway made her hastily return everything to the strongbox and lock it. She had just returned the portrait to its place when the door opened. Thomas stood in the doorway, his expression darkening at the sight of her. "What are you doing in here?" Bridget straightened, meeting his gaze steadily. "Father asked me to fetch some papers for him." Thomas's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "What papers?" "He wanted to review the deed to the north pasture," she improvised. "He's concerned about the water rights." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Thomas's face. He's too sick to be worrying about such things. Nevertheless, it's what he asked for. Bridget moved toward the door. "I'll take them up to him later when he's rested." Thomas blocked her path. "I'll take them to him." "You've been gone a long time, Bridget. Things have changed around here." "So I've noticed," she replied coolly. "But I'm still his daughter." "A daughter who abandoned her family when they needed her most," Thomas retorted. Bridget refused to rise to the bait. "I came when called." "That's what matters now." Thomas studied her face as if searching for something. "Why did you really come back, Bridget, after all this time, to make peace with Father before it's too late? And after he's gone, what then?" Bridget met his gaze unflinchingly. "That depends on what he wants of me." A muscle twitched in Thomas's jaw. "This ranch belongs to me. I've worked it while you were off playing schoolteacher. Remember that." "I have no designs on your inheritance, Thomas," Bridget said, sidestepping him to reach the door. "I made my choice 5 years ago." As she passed him, Thomas caught her arm. "Stay away from O'Malley," he warned, his voice low. "He's not what he seems." Bridget pulled free of his grip. "Neither are you, it appears." She left him standing in the office, her mind racing with questions. One thing was becoming clear: whatever was happening at the Aldridge Ranch went beyond a simple family reunion. And somehow, Declan O'Malley was at the center of it all. Supper that evening was a tense affair. Thomas sat at the head of the table in their father's place, while Martha picked at her food and Bridget tried to maintain polite conversation. The empty chair where James should have been loomed large between them. "The ranch looks well maintained," Bridget offered. "The herds seem healthy." Thomas grunted noncommittally. "We've had good years and bad. And this year," Bridget pressed. Thomas's eyes flicked to their mother, then back to Bridget. "We get by." "Your brother has worked himself to the bone," Martha interjected. "Since your father fell ill, he's carried the burden alone." "I'm sure he has," Bridget said, noting the flash of guilt that crossed Thomas's face. The conversation lapsed into uncomfortable silence until Martha spoke again. "Will you be staying long after your father passes?" The question hung heavily in the air. "I haven't thought that far ahead," Bridget answered honestly. "My teaching position in Boston is secure, but I could request an extended leave if needed." "There's nothing for you here," Thomas said flatly. Martha gasped. "Thomas, that's no way to speak to your sister." "It's the truth," he insisted. "Bridget made her choice years ago. She has her life in the East. We have ours here." "Perhaps we should let Bridget decide what's best for her," Martha suggested timidly. Thomas's fork clattered against his plate. This ranch can't support 3 of us, not with the way things are." "What way is that exactly?" Bridget asked, seizing the opening. Thomas's expression closed like a shutter. "Nothing for you to concern yourself with, financial matters." "I'm not without resources," Bridget said carefully. "If the ranch is in difficulty, we don't need your charity," Thomas snapped, rising from his chair. "This is still Aldridge land, and I'll manage it as Father would want." With that, he stormed from the room, leaving Bridget and her mother in stunned silence. "He's under tremendous strain," Martha finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The drought last summer, the falling cattle prices. It's been one thing after another." Bridget reached across the table to take her mother's hand. "Mama, is there something more going on?" "Something about Thomas and Harold Winters." Martha's face drained of color. "Where did you hear that name?" Father mentioned it. He seemed concerned. Martha withdrew her hand. "Your father's mind wanders sometimes. The fever makes him confused." "He seemed very lucid to me," Bridget observed. "Please, Bridget," Martha's eyes pleaded. "Don't ask questions about Harold Winters. Not here, not where Thomas might hear you." "You're frightened of him," Bridget realized with a chill. "Of Thomas." Martha's gaze dropped to her lap. "He has a temper like your grandfather." "It's worse when he drinks." "Has he hurt you?" Bridget asked, anger flaring. "No, nothing like that," Martha assured her quickly. "But he's changed since your father took ill. The responsibility weighs on him." Bridget wasn't convinced, but she could see her mother wouldn't say more. "I understand. I won't mention it again." After helping her mother clear the dishes, Bridget returned to her father's bedroom. James was sleeping, his breathing labored. Martha sat beside him, bathing his forehead with a cool cloth. "I'll sit with him," Bridget offered. "You should rest." Martha hesitated. "He might not wake again tonight." "All the more reason I should be here," Bridget insisted gently. "I've missed too much time with him already." With a grateful nod, Martha surrendered her place at the bedside. "Call if there's any change at all." Alone with her father, Bridget took his hand and settled into the bedside chair. The oil lamp cast flickering shadows across the room, and the night sounds of the ranch drifted through the partially open window, crickets chirping, the distant lowing of cattle, a coyote's mournful howl. Hours passed. Bridget dozed intermittently, always startling awake at the slightest change in her father's breathing. Just after midnight, she woke to find him watching her, his eyes clearer than they had been earlier. "You stayed," he murmured. "Of course I did." She leaned forward, squeezing his hand. "How are you feeling?" "Like a man with one foot in the grave," he said with a ghost of his old humor. "Did you find the strong box?" Bridget nodded. "I found it, but Thomas interrupted before I could examine everything properly. There was a journal, letters." "The journal explains most of it," James said, his voice strengthening slightly. "About O'Malley, about why he came here." "Father, how does Mr. O'Malley know me? Why would he say he's been waiting for me?" James's lips curved in a small smile. "Because of Catherine, my sister." "What does she have to do with this?" "Your sister married Edward Hamilton 3 years ago in Denver," James explained. "At their wedding, she met a young rancher, a friend of Edward's from their university days. She showed him a photograph of our family. Understanding began to dawn." "Declan O'Malley." James nodded. "According to Catherine, he couldn't take his eyes off your picture. Asked all sorts of questions about you. When he learned you'd left home under difficult circumstances, he seemed genuinely concerned." "But that doesn't explain why he came here to Copper Creek," Bridget pointed out. "Patience, daughter," James chided gently. "A few months after the wedding, Catherine wrote to us. Said O'Malley was looking for a fresh start, wanted to try ranching on his own. Asked if we knew of any land for sale in these parts." "And you did," Bridget guessed. "The old Callahan place next ridge over. had been sitting empty since old Jim Callahan passed on, no heirs to claim it. James paused, gathering strength. I told Catherine to send him our way. He arrived that spring, bought the land, and has been a good neighbor ever since. But why would he come here just because he saw my photograph? Bridget pressed, still confused. James's eyes took on a faraway look. Some things can't be explained, Bridget. Your mother and I, we knew the moment we met that we were meant for each other. Perhaps O'Malley felt something similar. Bridget flushed. That's absurd. He doesn't even know me. Maybe not, James conceded, but he's proven himself a good man, honest, hardworking. His expression grew serious. And he's been helping me gather evidence against Winters and his gang. Why would he risk himself that way? At first, because I asked him to. Later, I think, because he saw what was happening to this family, to Thomas. James's voice faltered. Your brother wasn't always like this, Bridget. The bitterness, the drinking, it started after you left. He felt responsible. Bridget's heart constricted. For my leaving, but that was my choice. Was it? James asked softly, or did we force your hand? The memory of that final, terrible argument rose unbidden, her father's roaring disapproval when she'd announced her plan to attend teaching college in the East, Thomas's mocking laughter, her mother's silent tears. It doesn't matter now, Bridget said, pushing the painful recollection away. What matters is helping this family. James squeezed her hand weakly. There's more in that strongbox than just my journal. There's evidence that could put Winters away for good. Bank drafts, witness statements, a map showing where they've hidden the stolen cattle. I'll look at everything tomorrow, Bridget promised. But what can I do with this information? You said the sheriff is in Winters's pocket. Marshal Jenkins in Silver Creek isn't, James said. He's been building a case against Winters for years. All he needs is proof tying Winters to the rustling operation. And Thomas, what happens to him if Winters is arrested? Pain clouded James's features. I've thought of little else these past months. If Thomas cooperates, testifies against Winters, the marshal might show leniency. And if he doesn't, James closed his eyes, then he'll hang alongside Winters and the rest of the gang. The gravity of the situation settled over Bridget like a physical weight. What would you have me do? Take the evidence to Marshal Jenkins. He'll know what to do next. James's voice was fading again, his energy clearly waning. O'Malley will help you. He knows the way to Silver Creek. I'll do it, Bridget vowed. I'll save Thomas even if he doesn't want to be saved. James nodded, a peaceful expression crossing his face. I always knew you'd come home when we needed you most, my brave girl. His eyes drifted closed. Now let me rest. Dawn comes early. Bridget sat with him until his breathing evened into sleep, her mind churning with all she'd learned. The connection to Declan O'Malley still seemed fantastical, a man uprooting his life because of a photograph. But her father had no reason to invent such a tale, not now. As the first gray light of dawn filtered through the curtains, Bridget slipped from her father's room. The house was silent, the others still asleep. It was the perfect opportunity to examine the strongbox more thoroughly. In her father's office, Bridget quickly retrieved the box and this time emptied its contents onto the desk. The journal she set aside, having already learned its significance. The stack of letters proved to be correspondence between her father and Marshal Jenkins, detailing suspicions about Winters and his operation. The leather pouch contained not coins, as she'd initially thought, but a gold pocket watch, her grandfather's, by the look of it, and a small enameled locket. Opening the locket, she found a tiny portrait of herself, painted from a photograph taken before she left for Boston. Why would her father keep this hidden away? The final item, the deed, wasn't for the ranch as she'd expected, but for a small parcel of land adjacent to the O'Malley property. Attached to it was a note in her father's handwriting. For Bridget, when the time comes. Bewildered, she returned everything to the box except the journal, which she tucked into her skirt pocket. She would need to read it in full to understand the entire situation. As she was replacing the strongbox in the safe, a floorboard creaked behind her. Bridget whirled around to find Thomas standing in the doorway, his expression thunderous. "What are you doing?" he demanded. Before Bridget could respond, a horse's whinny from the yard outside drew Thomas's attention. He crossed to the window and cursed under his breath. "O'Malley! What's he doing here at this hour?" Bridget seized the opportunity to slide the portrait back into place. "Father asked him to come." "Remember?" Thomas shot her a suspicious look but moved toward the door. "Stay here. I'll deal with him." Alone again, Bridget quickly finished securing the safe and followed her brother, staying far enough behind to remain unnoticed. From the shadow of the front hallway, she could see Thomas confronting Declan in the yard. "You're not welcome here, O'Malley," Thomas was saying, his stance aggressive. "Not today." Declan remained mounted on his horse, looking down at Thomas with remarkable composure. "Your father asked me to check in, and that's what I'm doing." "My father is dying," Thomas spat. "He doesn't need visitors disturbing his rest." "I'm not here to disturb anyone," Declan replied evenly, "just to see if Miss Aldridge needs anything from town." At the mention of her name, Bridget stepped onto the porch. "Good morning, Mr. O'Malley." Both men turned at the sound of her voice. Thomas's scowl deepened, while Declan's face softened into a smile that made Bridget's heart skip inexplicably. "Miss Aldridge," Declan greeted her, removing his hat. "I hope I'm not intruding at such an early hour." "Not at all," she assured him, descending the steps to join them in the yard. "Father had a restful night." Thomas inserted himself between them. "Bridget, go back inside." O'Malley was just leaving. Bridget ignored him, addressing Declan directly. "Actually, Mr. O'Malley, I was hoping you might escort me into town today. There are some supplies I'd like to purchase for Father's comfort." Declan's eyes held hers, a silent understanding passing between them. "It would be my pleasure, Miss Aldridge." "Absolutely not," Thomas interjected. "If you need supplies, I'll send one of the ranch hands." "I've been cooped up on trains for days," Bridget countered. "A ride into town would do me good, and Mr. O'Malley has already offered his escort." "This isn't Boston, Bridget," Thomas said through clenched teeth. "You can't just wander off with a man you barely know." "Mr. O'Malley isn't a stranger," Bridget replied calmly. "He's Father's trusted neighbor and friend." Thomas stepped closer, lowering his voice ominously. "You don't know what you're meddling in. Stay away from him, or I swear, is everything all right out here?" Martha's voice cut through the tension as she appeared on the porch, wrapped in a shawl against the morning chill. Thomas immediately backed away. "Everything's fine, Mother." O'Malley was just leaving. "Actually," Bridget said firmly, "Mr. O'Malley is taking me into town. I won't be long, Mama. I promise to be back before Father wakes." Martha looked uncertainly between her children, then at Declan. "Perhaps some fresh air would do you good, Bridget." "You were up all night with your father." Thomas's face darkened with anger, but he said nothing more, stalking off toward the barn with rigid shoulders. "I'll just fetch my shawl," Bridget told Declan, hurrying back into the house. In her room, she quickly changed into a fresh dress and tucked her father's journal securely in her pocket. Whatever happened today, she needed to keep that journal safe. When she returned to the yard, Declan had dismounted and was speaking quietly with Martha. He broke off when he saw Bridget, offering a hand to help her onto his horse. "We'll have to ride double," he explained. "I wasn't expecting to take a passenger." Bridget hesitated only briefly before allowing him to boost her into the saddle. He swung up behind her, his chest warm against her back as he reached around her for the reins. "We'll be back before noon," he assured Martha, who nodded and waved them off. As they rode down the drive, Bridget was acutely aware of Declan's proximity, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the slight roughness of his denim jacket against her arms, the clean scent of soap and leather that surrounded him. "Your brother seemed mighty unhappy to see me," Declan observed once they were out of earshot of the house. "Thomas is unhappy about most things these days," Bridget replied, "particularly me." "He's afraid you'll discover what he's been up to," Declan said matter-of-factly. "With Winters and his gang." Bridget twisted slightly to look at him. "You know about that. Your father and I have been tracking their operation for months. We were nearly ready to take our evidence to the marshal when your father fell ill." "He told me some of it last night," Bridget said. "And I found his journal." Declan's arms tightened around her reflexively. "Did you read it?" "Not yet," she admitted. "But he told me why you came to Copper Creek, about seeing my photograph at my sister's wedding." Even in profile, she could see the flush that crept up his neck. "I was hoping to explain that myself, under better circumstances." "Is it true?" Bridget pressed. "Did you really move here because of a photograph?" Declan was quiet for a long moment, guiding the horse onto the main road toward town. "It sounds foolish when you put it that way." "It does," Bridget agreed. "Completely irrational. I know," he sighed. "But something about your face in that photograph, it stayed with me. Your sister told me you were teaching in Boston, that you'd left under difficult circumstances. I couldn't stop thinking about you." "So you moved hundreds of miles on a whim?" Bridget couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice. "Not entirely," Declan clarified. "I was looking for a fresh start anyway. My father had died, leaving me some money but no real purpose. When Catherine mentioned the land for sale near your family's ranch, it seemed like fate, I suppose. And when you got here, when you realized I wasn't here, I was disappointed," he admitted. "But your father took me under his wing. He'd show me photographs of you, tell me stories about you growing up. In a way, I came to know you through him." Bridget fell silent, trying to process his words. It was simultaneously the most romantic and most unsettling thing she'd ever heard. "I realize how this must sound to you," Declan continued. "A stranger claiming some connection to you based on a photograph and your father's stories. But I never intended to impose myself on you. I was content to help your father, to be a good neighbor." "Until he asked you to help gather evidence against Winters," Bridget surmised. Declan nodded, though she couldn't see it. "Your father was worried sick about Thomas. He thought if we could bring Winters to justice, Thomas might have a chance to redeem himself. And now your father is dying, and Thomas is in deeper than ever with Winters. The evidence we've gathered is in that strongbox, but it needs to get to Marshal Jenkins in Silver Creek as soon as possible." "Why the urgency?" Bridget asked. "Because Winters is planning something big," Declan explained grimly. "A major cattle rustling operation, scheduled for 3 days from now. They're going to hit the Carson Ranch over in Elkhorn Valley, the biggest spread in the territory. And Thomas is involved. He's Winters's inside man. He's been scouting the ranch, mapping guard rotations, planning escape routes." The disgust in Declan's voice was palpable. "If they succeed, it'll be the biggest theft in territorial history, and if they're caught in the act, Thomas will hang," Bridget finished quietly. They rode in silence for several minutes, each lost in thought. As they crested a hill, Copper Creek came into view, the morning sun glinting off the few glass windows in the modest collection of buildings. "We're not really going shopping, are we?" Declan asked suddenly. "No," Bridget confirmed. "I needed an excuse to get away from Thomas. I need to read Father's journal to understand everything that's happening." "We could go to my place," Declan offered. It's not far and Thomas won't look for you there. Bridget considered the suggestion. Being alone with Declan in his home would certainly raise eyebrows if anyone found out. But right now, propriety seemed less important than saving her brother from the gallows. All right, she agreed, but I need to be back before Father wakes. Declan guided the horse away from the main road, taking a narrower trail that wound through a stand of cottonwoods. There's something else you should know, he said after a moment. About your father's illness. Bridget tensed. What about it? Doc Simmons doesn't think it's natural. The symptoms, the rapid decline. Declan hesitated. He suspects poison. The world seemed to tilt beneath Bridget. Poison, but who would, she broke off, the horrible truth dawning on her. Thomas. You think Thomas is poisoning our father, not Thomas himself, Declan corrected. But Winters has a man, they call him the chemist. He specializes in poisons that mimic natural illnesses. Your father started declining right after he and I began gathering evidence against Winters. This can't be happening, Bridget whispered, her mind reeling. My own brother involved in our father's murder. We don't know for certain that Thomas is aware of it, Declan said carefully. He might just think your father is naturally ill. Or he might be complicit in patricide, Bridget countered, anger rising through her shock. Either way, we need to stop this. Now. Declan's ranch house came into view as they emerged from the trees, a modest structure of new cut timber with a distinctive red roof. A small barn stood nearby, with a corral holding several horses who lifted their heads curiously at their approach. It's not much, Declan said as he helped Bridget dismount. But it's home. The interior was surprisingly neat for a bachelor's dwelling, a simple main room with a stone fireplace, a wooden table with 4 chairs, and bookshelves lining one wall. Through an open door, Bridget glimpsed a bedroom with a neatly made bed covered in a patchwork quilt similar to those her mother made. You have quite a collection of books, Bridget observed, scanning the titles. Declan smiled sheepishly. I've always been a reader. Your father mentioned you were the same. Bridget nodded, removing the journal from her pocket. Speaking of reading, of course. Declan gestured to the table. Make yourself comfortable, I'll make some coffee. While Declan busied himself at the stove, Bridget opened her father's journal and began to read. The early entries confirmed what James had already told her: Declan's arrival, his purchase of the neighboring ranch, his growing friendship with her father. But as she read further, a more complex picture emerged. Her father described his growing concerns about Thomas's gambling debts and his association with Harold Winters. There were detailed notes about cattle movements, suspicious activities at neighboring ranches, meetings between Thomas and known members of the Winters gang. Most disturbing were the entries from the past few months, as James documented his own declining health. Sick again today. Worse than before. Martha thinks it's my heart, but something feels wrong. Food tastes strange. Suspect something in the coffee Thomas brings me each morning. Asked O'Malley to bring Doc Simmons secretly tomorrow. And later, Simmons confirms my fears. Symptoms consistent with arsenic poisoning. Small doses, administered over time, told only O'Malley and made him swear to secrecy. If Thomas is involved, confronting him could be dangerous. Must protect Martha. Sent telegram to Bridget today. Pray she comes in time. Bridget closed the journal, feeling ill. Her father had known he was being poisoned, had suspected Thomas's involvement, yet had still tried to protect his son. Coffee. Declan placed a steaming mug before her. How could I possibly drink anything right now? Bridget asked, pushing the journal toward him. After reading this. Declan glanced at the open page and nodded grimly. I've been bringing your father clean food and water whenever possible, but I can't be there all the time. We need to get him away from that house. Bridget insisted. Today. If what he's written is true, every hour he stays there puts him in danger. Moving him could kill him faster, Declan cautioned. He's very weak, and if Thomas realizes we know. Then what do we do? Bridget demanded, frustration boiling over. Wait for my father to die. Allow Thomas to get away with murder. Declan took her hand across the table, his touch unexpectedly calming. We take the evidence to Marshal Jenkins today. Get him to issue arrest warrants for Winters and his gang. Once they're in custody, we can deal with Thomas. And if Thomas resists, if he tries to run, then I'll stop him, Declan said simply. For your father's sake, for yours. The intensity in his eyes made Bridget's breath catch. Here was a man she'd just met, willing to risk his life for her family, because of a photograph, because of stories her father had told. Why? She whispered. Why would you do all this for us? For me, Declan's grip on her hand tightened. Because from the moment I saw your photograph, I felt connected to you in a way I can't explain, and because your father became the father I'd lost. He believed in me when no one else did. What if I'm not the person you imagined? Bridget asked. What if I disappoint you? A small smile curved his lips. In the day since you arrived, you've shown more courage and determination than most people I've known my entire life. You're exactly the person your father described. Bridget withdrew her hand, suddenly uncomfortable with the intimacy of the moment. We should go. Silver Creek is at least 2 hours' ride, and I need to be back before sundown. Declan nodded, respecting her need for distance. I'll get the strongbox from your father's office. You go back to the house, keep Thomas occupied. I'll meet you at the creek crossing in an hour. Won't Thomas be suspicious if I return alone? Tell him I was called away on urgent business, that one of the ranch hands is bringing you back. Declan stood, collecting his hat. I know you've only just met me, Bridget, but I'm asking you to trust me now, for your father's sake. Bridget rose as well, meeting his gaze steadily. I trust you, Declan, not because of whatever connection you believe exists between us, but because my father trusted you. That's enough for now. Relief washed over his features. Thank you. That's all I ask. As they rode back toward the Aldridge ranch, taking a different route that would allow Declan to approach the house unseen, Bridget found herself studying his profile. There was something undeniably compelling about him, not just his physical appearance, though he was certainly handsome, but the quiet strength he radiated. Tell me something about yourself, she said suddenly. Something my father wouldn't have known. Declan considered the question. I was engaged once, back in Denver. She left me for a banker with more money and better prospects. I'm sorry, Bridget said, surprised by his candor. He shrugged. Don't be. It wasn't love, not really. Just two people who thought they should be together because everyone expected it. Is that why you were so affected by my photograph? Because you were heartbroken? No, Declan said thoughtfully. By then, I was long over Elizabeth. Your photograph. It was something else entirely. A recognition, maybe, as if I'd found something I didn't know I was looking for. The words sent an unexpected shiver through Bridget. That sounds like one of the novels my students read, romantic but improbable. Yet here we are, Declan pointed out. You, returned after 5 years away. Me, helping you save your family from a disaster they don't even know is coming. If that's not improbable, I don't know what is. They had reached the creek crossing where they would part ways. Declan brought the horse to a halt, helping Bridget down. Be careful, she warned as he turned to go. Thomas is dangerous, especially if he suspects what we're doing. So am I when necessary, Declan assured her with a grim smile. 1 hour. The creek crossing. I'll bring everything we need. Bridget nodded, watching as he rode away before turning toward the ranch house visible in the distance. Her mind was a tumult of emotions: fear for her father, anger at Thomas, and something more complex where Declan was concerned. She had come home expecting to make peace with her father before his death. Instead, she had stumbled into a web of deceit, crime, and possibly murder. And at the center of it all, a man who claimed to have been waiting for her, sight unseen, for years. As implausible as it seemed, Bridget couldn't deny the connection she felt to Declan. Whether it was gratitude for his help or something deeper, only time would tell. For now, she had a brother to distract and a father to save. The Aldridge ranch was quiet as Bridget approached. No sign of Thomas in the yard or the barn. She entered the house cautiously, listening for any sound that might indicate his presence. Bridget. Martha appeared from the kitchen, flour dusting her apron. "You're back early. Where's Mr. O'Malley?" "He was called away on ranch business," Bridget explained, removing her shawl. "How is father?" "Sleeping peacefully." Martha wiped her hands on her apron. "He asked for you when he woke earlier, said he had more to tell you." "I'll go to him now," Bridget promised. "Is Thomas about?" "He rode out after you left, said he had business in town." Martha frowned. "He seemed angry, Bridget, more than usual." Alarm bells rang in Bridget's mind. If Thomas had gone to town, he might have seen that she and Declan never arrived there, which meant he might suspect they were up to something. "When did he leave?" she asked, trying to keep her voice casual. "Not long after you." "An hour, perhaps." Martha studied her daughter's face. "Bridget, what's happening?" "You and your father whispering together. Thomas storming about, Mr. O'Malley visiting at all hours. Something's not right." Bridget hesitated. How much could she tell her mother without putting her in danger? "It's complicated, Mama. But I promise, everything I'm doing is to help this family." Martha's eyes filled with tears. "You were always the strong one, like your father." She touched Bridget's cheek gently. "Whatever it is, be careful." With a reassuring smile, Bridget hurried upstairs to her father's room. James was awake, propped against his pillows, looking marginally better than the night before. "You're back," he said as she entered. "Did O'Malley tell you about the poison?" Bridget nodded, taking her seat beside the bed. "And I read your journal. Why didn't you tell me immediately?" "Didn't want to frighten you." James took her hand. "But there's more you need to know about Thomas. That he's working with Winters. That he might be involved in poisoning you. I know all that." James shook his head weakly. "It's worse. Thomas isn't just working with Winters. He's become his right hand. The planning, the coordinating, it's all Thomas now. Winters just provides the men and takes his cut." Bridget felt ill. "How long has this been going on?" "Almost 2 years. Started small, a few cattle here and there, nothing that would draw attention. But lately—" James's voice faltered. "Lately, it's gotten out of control. The Carson raid they're planning could turn violent. People could die. Declan and I are taking the evidence to Marshal Jenkins today," Bridget told him. "He'll stop the raid before it happens." Relief washed over James's face. "Good." "That's good." He squeezed her hand. "There's something else you should have in my bedside drawer, the small box." Bridget retrieved a worn leather box from the drawer. Inside was a silver locket on a delicate chain. "It was your grandmother's," James explained. "I always meant to give it to you." Inside, Bridget opened the locket to find a tiny portrait of her father on one side and an empty space on the other. "The other side is for whoever claims your heart," James said softly. "I had hoped to see it filled before I died." Tears pricked Bridget's eyes as she fastened the locket around her neck. "Thank you, Father." "Now go," James urged. "Get that evidence to Jenkins and Bridget." His eyes held hers intently. "Don't judge O'Malley too harshly for his unusual devotion. Sometimes the heart knows what the mind cannot comprehend." With a final kiss to her father's forehead, Bridget left the room. She needed to gather a few essentials for the journey to Silver Creek and be at the creek crossing within the hour. In her bedroom, she quickly changed into her most practical traveling dress and sturdy boots. She tucked a small knife into her boot, a habit she'd developed during her travels, and bundled a shawl and gloves for the journey. Finally, she penned a brief note to her mother explaining that she'd gone to visit a sick friend and would return by evening. As Bridget descended the stairs, the front door burst open. Thomas stood in the doorway, his expression thunderous, his clothes dust-covered from hard riding. "Going somewhere, sister?" he asked, blocking her path. Bridget kept her voice steady. "I was just about to check on Father, then visit Mrs. Lawson. Mother mentioned she's been ill." "Funny," Thomas said, advancing into the house. "I just came from town. No one's seen you or O'Malley all morning." "As I told Mother, Mr. O'Malley was called away on ranch business. One of his hands escorted me part way back, but I walked the rest." Thomas's lips twisted in a sneer. "You were never a good liar, Bridget. Not as a child, not now." "I don't know what you're talking about," Bridget maintained, gripping the banister. "I think you do." Thomas stalked closer. "I think you've been poking your nose where it doesn't belong, reading Father's papers, talking to O'Malley about things that don't concern you." "Father's health concerns me greatly," Bridget countered, standing her ground, "as does this family's welfare." "This family was doing just fine until you came back," Thomas snapped. "Father was accepting his fate. Mother was coming to terms with it. Then you arrive, stirring up the past, making accusations. I've accused no one of anything," Bridget interrupted. "But perhaps you're feeling guilty about something, Thomas. Perhaps there's something you'd like to confess." For a moment she thought he might strike her. His hand clenched at his side, his face flushed with anger. But then, abruptly, his demeanor changed. His shoulders relaxed and a cold smile replaced his scowl. "You always thought you were so clever," he said, almost conversationally. "Father's favorite, the bright one, the one with a future." He laughed bitterly. "But you're the one who abandoned this family when times got hard, left me to deal with failing crops, dying cattle, mounting debts." "I would have helped if you'd asked," Bridget said quietly. "You never asked. And now you're back, playing the dutiful daughter at the 11th hour." Thomas shook his head in disgust. "Too little, too late, Bridget. It's never too late to do the right thing," she insisted. "Even now, Thomas, whatever you've done, whatever you've been involved in, we can fix it together." Something flickered in Thomas's eyes, regret, perhaps, or longing. But it was quickly extinguished. "There's nothing to fix. Everything is proceeding exactly as planned." "Including Father's illness," Bridget challenged, unable to hold back any longer. Thomas's expression hardened. "You should have stayed in Boston, Bridget. You would have been safer there." The threat was unmistakable. Bridget backed up a step. "Are you threatening me, Thomas? Your own sister." "I'm warning you," he corrected. "Stay out of my business. Stay away from O'Malley. And forget whatever nonsense Father has been filling your head with." "Or what?" Bridget demanded, her fear giving way to anger. "Will you poison me too?" Thomas's eyes widened, fractionally confirmation enough of his guilt. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I'm talking about," Bridget retorted. "Arsenic in Father's coffee. Small doses administered daily. Did Winters put you up to it, or was that your idea?" "You have no proof of anything," Thomas said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Don't I?" Bridget bluffed. "Father kept records, notes, he suspected for months, and Doc Simmons confirmed it." Thomas paled visibly. "You're lying." "Am I? Why don't we ride into town right now and ask Doc Simmons?" Bridget pressed her advantage. "Or better yet, why don't we ask Marshal Jenkins what he thinks of the evidence we've gathered?" At the mention of the marshal, Thomas's composure cracked. "What evidence? What have you done?" "Nothing yet," Bridget said truthfully. "But I will, Thomas, unless you help me stop this madness now." For a long moment, Thomas stared at her, internal conflict playing across his features. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. "It's too late. The plan is already in motion. The Carson raid happens tomorrow night, not 3 days from now." Winters moved up the timeline. Bridget's blood ran cold. "Why?" "Because he doesn't trust me anymore," Thomas admitted. "He thinks I've been talking to the law. He's right in a way. I have been considering it, but I never got the chance." "You can still make this right," Bridget urged, seeing a glimmer of the brother she once knew. "Help me stop the raid. Testify against Winters." Thomas shook his head despondently. "You don't understand. Winters has men watching the ranch, watching me. If I make one wrong move, Mother pays the price." "Mother? What does she have to do with this?" "Insurance," Thomas said bitterly. "Winters doesn't trust anyone. He wanted leverage to ensure my loyalty." Pieces fell into place in Bridget's mind. Martha's fear, her reluctance to discuss Thomas or Winters. "Does she know about any of this?" "She knows Winters is dangerous," Thomas said. "She knows I've gotten mixed up with him, but the rest—" He shook his head. "She believes Father is dying naturally. She doesn't know about the raid or—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "Or that you've been poisoning Father," Bridget completed for him. "How could you, Thomas? Our own father," anguish crossed Thomas's face. "I never wanted any of this. I just needed money to save the ranch." Winters offered a solution. "By the time I realized what I'd gotten into, it was too late to back out." "It's never too late," Bridget insisted, seeing his resolve wavering. "Help me stop this, Thomas. Help me save this family, what's left of it." Thomas ran a hand through his hair, looking suddenly older than his years. "What would you have me do? Winters has 20 men, armed men, and they'll be at the Carson place tomorrow night." "We need to warn the Carsons," Bridget said decisively, "and get word to Marshal Jenkins. If we can set a trap for Winters and his gang—" "They'll kill me," Thomas said flatly. "They'll kill all of us." "Not if we're smart," Bridget countered. "Not if we work together." A long silence stretched between them, broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Finally, Thomas nodded, a weary resignation in his eyes. "All right, for Mother's sake, for Father's." Relief flooded through Bridget. "Thank you, Thomas." "Don't thank me yet," he warned. "This could still go very wrong, and Bridget—" His expression darkened. "Don't trust O'Malley completely. There's more to him than you know." Before Bridget could ask what he meant, the sound of approaching hoofbeats drew their attention. Through the window they saw Declan riding into the yard, the strongbox secured to his saddle. "He's early," Bridget murmured, glancing at Thomas. "Will you help us?" Thomas hesitated, then nodded curtly. "For now. But we do this my way. I know Winters. I know how he thinks." Together they went out to meet Declan, who looked surprised to see them side by side, apparently united. "Thomas knows everything," Bridget explained as Declan dismounted. "He's going to help us." Declan's gaze shifted to Thomas, skepticism evident. "Is that so?" "The raid's been moved up," Thomas said by way of answer. "It's happening tomorrow night, not 3 days from now. We don't have much time." Declan's expression hardened. "And you're just telling us this now?" "I'm telling you at all," Thomas retorted. "Be grateful for that." Tension crackled between the two men until Bridget stepped forward. "We need to work together, for everyone's sake." Declan nodded reluctantly. "What's the plan?" "First, we need to get Father to safety," Bridget said firmly. "Somewhere Winters's men can't find him." "My place," Declan suggested. "It's defensible and my ranch hands are loyal." Thomas shook his head. "Too obvious. Winters will look there first." "What about Catherine's old cabin?" Bridget suggested. "The hunting lodge up in the hills. Does it still stand?" "It does," Thomas confirmed. "And no one's used it in years. Winters wouldn't think to look there." "Perfect," Bridget decided. "Thomas, you and I will move Father tonight after dark. Declan, you'll take the evidence to Marshal Jenkins and bring him back with as many deputies as he can spare." "And Mother?" Thomas asked. Winters has men watching her. Bridget considered this complication. She'll have to come with us to the cabin. We'll leave after supper. Tell anyone who asks that we're taking Father to see a specialist in Silver Creek. Winters won't believe that, Thomas warned. He doesn't need to, Declan interjected. He just needs to think you're following his orders until the raid tomorrow night. By then, the marshal will be in position at the Carson Ranch and Winters will be walking into a trap. Thomas looked dubious. It's risky. A lot could go wrong. Everything worth doing carries risk, Bridget said firmly. Are we agreed on the plan? After a moment's hesitation, both men nodded. Good. Bridget straightened her shoulders. Declan, you should leave immediately for Silver Creek. The sooner the marshal knows, the better our chances. I'll ride with him partway, Thomas offered. To make sure he gets through safely, Winters has men watching the roads. Declan's eyes narrowed suspiciously. No offense, but I'd rather take my chances alone. It's not a request, Thomas said coldly. I know where Winters's men are posted. You don't. Bridget sensed the hostility between them could derail their fragile plan. Please, she implored Declan. Trust me on this. Thomas wants to make things right. After a long moment, Declan nodded. Fine, but I'll be watching my back. As will I, Thomas assured him grimly. Bridget watched the two men mount up, anxiety gnawing at her. Be careful, she called as they prepared to ride out. Both of you. Declan's eyes met hers, a wealth of unspoken emotion in them. I'll be back by nightfall, with the marshal. As they disappeared down the drive, Bridget turned back toward the house. She had preparations to make gathering supplies for the journey to the cabin, explaining the situation to her mother, and ensuring her father was strong enough for the trip. Above all, she needed to pray that Thomas's change of heart was genuine, and that her trust in Declan was not misplaced. For if either man betrayed her now, the consequences would be deadly for them all. The afternoon passed in a blur of quiet activity. Bridget packed essentials for their flight to the cabin: food, clothing, medicines for her father. She explained the situation to Martha in carefully measured terms, revealing Thomas's involvement with Winters but not his role in James's poisoning. That truth could wait for a safer time. Martha received the news with remarkable composure. I suspected something like this, she admitted. Thomas has been different these past months. Secretive, troubled. You're not surprised? Bridget asked, pausing in her packing. Martha shook her head sadly. A mother knows when her child is carrying a burden too heavy for his shoulders. I've been praying for him to find his way back to the right path. And now, Bridget prompted. Now I pray for all of us, Martha said simply. That we survive this ordeal and find peace afterward. As dusk approached with no sign of Declan or Thomas, Bridget's anxiety mounted. They should have been back by now, or at least Thomas should have returned. Had something gone wrong? Had Thomas betrayed them after all? She was checking on her father, who had been informed of the plan, and was resting in preparation for the journey, when the sound of a horse approaching at speed drew her to the window. A lone rider was galloping toward the house, not Declan or Thomas, but a stranger. As he drew closer, Bridget recognized one of the Carson Ranch hands, a young man named Joey who sometimes came to town with the Carson boys. She hurried downstairs and out to the porch as he reined in his lathered horse. Miss Aldridge, he called, breathless. I'm looking for Thomas Aldridge. It's urgent. He's not here, Bridget replied, dread pooling in her stomach. What's happened? Joey dismounted, leading his exhausted horse toward the water trough. There's trouble at the Carson place. Men shot. Mr. Carson sent me to find your brother. What men? Bridget demanded, following him. Who's been shot? Outlaws, Joey explained, allowing his horse to drink. They came early, tried to scout the place for tomorrow's raid, But Mr. Carson was warned some fella named O'Malley rode out this morning with news of the raid. They were ready. Relief surged through Bridget. Declan had reached the Carsons at least. What about Marshal Jenkins? Was he there? Joey shook his head. No Marshal, just the ranchers from Roundabout. They formed a posse when they heard what was coming. And Thomas, have you seen him? Again, Joey shook his head. No, madam. That's why Mr. Carson sent me here. Said your brother might be in danger if Winters thinks he talked. Bridget's mind raced. If Thomas hadn't returned to the Carson ranch with Declan and he wasn't here at the Aldridge ranch, where was he? What about Mr. O'Malley? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Is he all right? A shadow crossed Joey's face. Don't rightly know, madam. He was there when the shooting started, that's all I know. Fear clutched at Bridget's heart. Declan could be dead or wounded, and Thomas was missing. The plan was unraveling before it had properly begun. Joey, I need you to take a message to Mr. Carson, Bridget said decisively. Tell him we're moving my father to safety tonight. Ask if he can spare a man or two to escort us. Yes, madam, Joey nodded earnestly. Anything else? Yes, if Mr. O'Malley is there and able, tell him. Bridget hesitated. What could she possibly say? Tell him I'm keeping my promise, he'll understand. As Joey mounted up and rode back toward the Carson ranch, Bridget returned to the house. She needed to accelerate their plans. If Winters had lost men in the skirmish at the Carsons, he would be out for blood. And Thomas, as his lieutenant, would be the first target of his wrath unless Thomas had already thrown in his lot with Winters for good. Mama, she called, entering the house. We need to leave now. There's been trouble at the Carsons. Martha appeared from the kitchen, alarm on her face. Thomas? No word, Bridget admitted. But we can't wait for him. It's not safe here anymore. With grim efficiency, they loaded the wagon with their supplies and carefully moved James from his bed. He was weak but alert, understanding the gravity of the situation. Thomas will find us, he assured Martha as they settled him in the wagon. He knows where we're going. Bridget took the reins with Martha beside her, and James secured as comfortably as possible in the wagon bed. As darkness fell, they set out for the hunting cabin, following a little-used trail that wound up into the foothills. The journey was slow and tense. Every shadow seemed to conceal a potential threat, every sound a warning. But they encountered no one, and after 2 hours of careful travel, the cabin loomed before them, a solid shadow against the starlit sky. It was a sturdy structure, built by Bridget's grandfather as a retreat from the ranch's demands. One large room with a stone fireplace, a small bedroom, and a lean-to kitchen. Dust covered everything, but the roof was sound and the walls thick enough to repel both weather and potential attackers. They settled James in the bedroom, built a fire, and prepared a simple meal from the supplies they'd brought. By the time they'd eaten, it was nearing midnight and still no sign of Thomas, Declan, or the promised escorts from the Carson ranch. Try to rest, Bridget urged her mother. I'll keep watch. Martha reluctantly agreed, stretching out on a pallet near James's bed. Bridget took up position by the window, a rifle across her lap. Her father had insisted she learn to shoot as a girl, a skill she'd maintained even in Boston, where she occasionally visited a discreet shooting gallery that catered to women. Hours passed. The fire burned low. Bridget's eyes grew heavy, but she forced herself to remain alert, listening for the approach of horses that would signal either rescue or danger. Just before dawn, as the eastern sky began to lighten, she heard the soft thud of hoofbeats on the forest floor. Gripping the rifle, she peered into the gloom, trying to make out the rider's identity. A lone figure emerged from the trees, slumped in the saddle. Even in the dim light, she recognized Declan's horse. But the rider, Bridget rushed outside, heedless of potential danger. As she reached the horse, the rider stirred, raising his head. "Bridget," Declan's voice was weak, pain-filled. "I'm here," she assured him, helping him dismount. His shirt was dark with blood, his face pale in the growing light. "You're wounded." "It's not bad," he insisted, though he leaned heavily on her as they moved toward the cabin. "Caught a bullet in the shoulder. Carson's doctor patched me up." Inside, by the light of the rekindled fire, Bridget examined his wound. The doctor had indeed done a professional job, but the ride had reopened the injury, causing it to bleed through the bandages. "What happened?" she asked as she cleaned and rebandaged the wound. "Joey told us there was shooting at the Carsons." Declan winced as she worked. "Winters sent scouts ahead of schedule. They ran into Carson's men, who were already on alert thanks to your brother." "Thomas warned them?" Bridget asked, surprised. "Before he betrayed us, yes." Declan's voice hardened. "He led me into an ambush on the way to Silver Creek. I barely got away. Made it to the Carson place to warn them, but not to the marshal." Bridget's hand stilled. "Thomas betrayed you after everything?" Declan nodded grimly. "Winters got to him. Threatened your mother, I think. Thomas chose his side." "So the marshal doesn't know about the raid?" Bridget felt despair washing over her. "And Thomas is working with Winters against us." "The marshal knows," Declan assured her. "I sent one of Carson's men to Silver Creek after the shooting started. He should be back with Jenkins and his deputies by midday." He captured her hand. "But Thomas, Bridget, Thomas is lost to us. He's Winters's man now, completely." Tears stung Bridget's eyes. "I thought he wanted to make things right. He seemed so sincere." "People like Thomas, people who have compromised themselves bit by bit over years, they can't find their way back so easily," Declan said gently. "The pull of the wrong path is too strong." Bridget finished bandaging his shoulder and sat back, exhausted and heartsick. "So what happens now?" "Now we wait," Declan said, taking her hand again. "The Carsons are ready. The marshal is coming. Winters and his gang will ride into a trap tonight, and this will all be over." "And Thomas?" Bridget couldn't help asking. "What happens to him?" Declan's expression softened with compassion. "That depends on him. If he's caught with Winters during the raid, he'll hang with the rest. If he runs, he'll be an outlaw for the rest of his life," Bridget finished quietly. "I'm sorry," Declan said, and she knew he meant it. "I know you hope to save him." "I hope to save all of my family," Bridget admitted. "But perhaps that was never possible." They sat in silence for a moment, hands still joined, the fire casting flickering shadows across their faces. Then, tentatively, Declan raised his good arm and brushed a strand of hair from Bridget's face. "You amaze me," he said softly. "Your strength, your determination. Everything your father said about you was true, and yet somehow still doesn't capture who you really are." Bridget felt a blush warm her cheeks. "You hardly know me, Declan." "I know enough," he insisted. "I know you came home to a dying father and a brother in trouble, and instead of fleeing back to safety, you stayed to fight for your family. I know you're brave and clever and kind." His fingers traced the curve of her cheek. "And I know that I've been waiting my whole life to meet someone like you." "Declan," Bridget began, uncertain how to respond to such raw honesty. The moment was broken by Martha's voice from the bedroom doorway. "Bridget, is someone here?" Declan withdrew his hand as Bridget turned to her mother. "It's Mr. O'Malley, Mama. He's been wounded but will be all right." Martha hurried forward, concern etched on her face. "Mr. O'Malley, what happened? And Thomas, have you seen him?" Bridget and Declan exchanged glances, silently debating how much to tell her. Finally, Declan spoke, his voice gentle but honest. "Thomas has chosen to side with Winters, Mrs. Aldridge. I'm deeply sorry." Martha sank into a chair, her face ashen. "I feared as much when he didn't come home." She looked up, her eyes swimming with tears. Will they kill him? Not if we can help it, Bridget promised, kneeling beside her mother. But he's made his choice, Mama. We have to accept that. Martha nodded slowly, grief etching deeper lines into her face. His father would be heartbroken. Father already knows, Bridget said softly. He's known for months what Thomas was involved in. It's why he sent for me. To save Thomas, Martha asked. To save what could be saved, Bridget clarified. The ranch, our family name, and Thomas if possible. Dawn broke fully as they sat together, three people united by circumstance and shared concern. James slept in the bedroom, his breathing more regular than it had been in days away from the poison that had been slowly killing him. What happens now? Martha asked eventually. We wait, Declan replied. The marshal will be at the Carson Ranch by midday. The trap will be set for Winters and his gang. By this time tomorrow it should all be over. And we'll be safe to return home. Martha looked hopeful. If all goes as planned, Declan confirmed. Though your husband will need time to recover, the poison has taken a toll. Martha's brow furrowed. Poison? What poison? Bridget shot Declan a warning look, but it was too late. The truth would have to come out now. Father hasn't been ill naturally, Mama, Bridget explained gently. He's been poisoned, slowly over time. Horror dawned on Martha's face. Poisoned. But who would? She broke off, realization striking her. Thomas, my Thomas did this. We believe so, Bridget confirmed, taking her mother's hands. On Winters's orders, most likely. Martha's body seemed to collapse in on itself, grief overwhelming her. My son, she whispered. My own son tried to murder his father. Tears flowed freely down her cheeks. How did it come to this? Neither Bridget nor Declan had an answer. They could only offer their silent support as Martha wept for the son she had lost not to death, but to his own terrible choices. The day passed slowly. Declan slept for a few hours, his body needing rest to recover from his wound. Martha sat with James, who drifted in and out of consciousness, but seemed stronger with each passing hour. Bridget kept watch, moving between the window and the cabin door, alert for any sign of approach. By mid-afternoon, tension had wound Bridget's nerves to the breaking point. The marshal should have reached the Carson Ranch by now. The trap should be set. And yet, an uneasy feeling persisted, a sense that something was still very wrong. When Declan awoke and joined her by the window, she voiced her concerns. It's too quiet, she said. Shouldn't we have heard something by now? Gunfire from the Carson place or riders coming to tell us it's safe? Declan frowned, scanning the surrounding forest. It is unusual, he admitted. I expected Jenkins to send word once he arrived. You think something went wrong? Maybe the messenger never reached Silver Creek. Before Declan could respond, the sound of approaching horses reached them, multiple riders, moving at speed. Get inside, Declan ordered, drawing his pistol. Bar the door. Bridget hesitated. But what if it's the marshal? The marshal would approach more cautiously, Declan reasoned. This sounds like men in a hurry. Go, protect your parents. Heart pounding, Bridget retreated inside, securing the heavy wooden bar across the door. She took up the rifle and positioned herself at the window, where she could provide covering fire if needed. 5 riders burst from the trees, Thomas in the lead. Behind him rode 4 rough-looking men, all heavily armed. They reined in before Declan, who stood his ground, pistol raised. Thomas, Declan acknowledged coldly. I see you brought friends. Thomas dismounted, his expression a mask of contained fury. Where is she, O'Malley? Where's my sister? Safe, Declan replied, which is more than I can say for you when the marshal arrives. Thomas laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. The marshal isn't coming. The messenger never reached Silver Creek, and the Carson Ranch is currently on fire courtesy of Mr. Winters. Shock rippled through Bridget, watching from the window. The plan had failed completely. The Carsons, who had only tried to help, were paying the price for their involvement. "What do you want, Thomas?" Declan demanded. "Why come here?" "I want my sister," Thomas said simply. "Winters wants her silenced before she can talk to the authorities. And I want the strong box of evidence my father collected." "And your parents?" Declan challenged. "What does Winters want done with them?" A flicker of unease crossed Thomas's face. "That's not your concern." "It is when you're planning to murder your entire family," Declan retorted. "That is the plan, isn't it? Kill them all, burn the cabin, blame it on Winters. Then you inherit the ranch free and clear, with no one to contradict your story." Thomas's hand moved to his gun. "You talk too much, O'Malley. Always have." Inside the cabin, Bridget made a quick decision. Moving to the bedroom, she whispered urgently to her mother. "Thomas is outside with Winters's men. They mean to kill us all. I need you to hide with Father in the root cellar." Martha paled but nodded resolutely. Together, they helped James from the bed and guided him to the small trapdoor in the cabin floor. The root cellar was little more than a shallow pit dug into the earth, used to store potatoes and apples when the cabin was occupied. But it would hide them from immediate view. "Whatever happens," Bridget instructed as she closed the trapdoor over them, "don't come out until you're sure it's safe." Returning to the window, rifle ready, Bridget saw that the confrontation outside had escalated. Declan and Thomas stood barely 3 feet apart, both with hands hovering near their guns. Winters's men had spread out, clearly preparing to rush the cabin at Thomas's signal. Bridget had to act. Throwing open the window, she called out, "Thomas!" All heads whipped toward her. Thomas's eyes widened in surprise while Declan looked dismayed at her exposure. "Bridget, get back!" Declan shouted. "It's all right," she assured him, keeping the rifle trained on Thomas. "I want to hear what my brother has to say for himself." Thomas stepped forward, hands spread in a placating gesture. "Bridget, please, put down the rifle. I just want to talk." "Like you just talked to Declan on the way to Silver Creek," Bridget challenged. "Or like you just talked to Father while you poisoned him." "You don't understand," Thomas insisted. "Winters forced my hand. He threatened Mother, threatened the ranch, and now you're here to kill us all," Bridget interrupted. "I understand perfectly, Thomas." Thomas's face hardened. "If that's what you think of me, then you never knew me at all." "I knew a brother who loved his family once," Bridget said, her voice breaking slightly. "A brother who taught me to ride, who protected me from bullies in town." "What happened to him, Thomas?" For a moment, genuine anguish crossed Thomas's face. "He grew up. He faced reality. He did what had to be done to survive." "There's surviving, and then there's selling your soul," Bridget countered. "You crossed that line when you put poison in Father's coffee." "I had no choice," Thomas exploded. "Winters would have killed you all anyway." "At least this way it was slow, painless, Bridget repeated incredulously. "Father has been in agony for months." "Enough of this," one of Winters's men growled, spurring his horse forward. "Winters said to bring the girl and kill the rest. Let's get on with it." "No." Thomas whirled on the man. "I said I'd handle this my way." The standoff might have continued indefinitely if not for the sudden crack of a rifle from the tree line. One of Winters's men toppled from his horse, dead before he hit the ground. Chaos erupted. Declan tackled Thomas as the remaining outlaws opened fire on the cabin and the unseen sniper. Bridget ducked back from the window as bullets splintered the frame around her. More shots rang out from the forest, not one rifle now, but several. Through the window, Bridget glimpsed men in marshals' badges emerging from cover, laying down a withering field of fire. The marshal had come after all. In the yard, Declan and Thomas grappled in the dust, each trying to gain control of the other's weapon. The remaining outlaws were engaged with the marshals, leaving the brothers in spirit to their personal battle. Bridget watched, heart in her throat, as Declan finally pinned Thomas, pressing his pistol to Thomas's head. For a terrible moment, she thought Declan would pull the trigger. But instead, he knocked Thomas unconscious with the pistol butt and rolled away, seeking cover as bullets continued to fly. The gunfight was brief but intense. When it ended, all of Winters's men lay dead or wounded, and Marshal Jenkins himself strode into the yard, rifle in hand. "O'Malley," he called, "you still among the living?" Declan emerged from behind a water trough, blood seeping from a fresh graze on his arm. "Still here, Marshal. Glad you could join us." "Got delayed," Jenkins explained gruffly. "Ran into Winters himself on the road. He won't be troubling anyone anymore." Bridget unbarred the cabin door and rushed outside, her eyes immediately seeking Declan. Relief washed over her at the sight of him, battered but standing. "Marshal Jenkins," she acknowledged with a nod. "Your timing is impeccable." "Miss Aldridge, I presume," Jenkins replied, tipping his hat. "Your messenger reached us, though later than expected. Winters had men watching the roads." Bridget's gaze fell on Thomas, still unconscious where Declan had left him. "And my brother," Jenkins's expression hardened. "He'll stand trial for his part in all this. Might get leniency if he cooperates, especially given his relation to you." "And the Carsons?" Bridget asked anxiously. "Thomas said their ranch was burning." "Winters tried to attack, but they were ready," Jenkins assured her. "Some property damage, but no lives lost on their side." With the immediate danger past, Bridget returned to the cabin to retrieve her parents from their hiding place. James was weak but alert, insisting on being helped outside to see the outcome for himself. Martha followed, her eyes immediately finding Thomas's prone form. "Is he?" she asked fearfully. "Just unconscious," Bridget assured her. "He'll stand trial, Mama, but he's alive." As Jenkins's men secured Thomas and prepared to transport everyone back to town, Declan found Bridget standing alone by the cabin door. "You were right," he said softly. "About what?" she asked, turning to face him. "About Thomas. There was still good in him, somewhere deep down. He hesitated when Winters's man talked about killing you all. That hesitation gave the marshal time to arrive." Declan touched her cheek gently. "You still saved a part of your brother, Bridget." Tears filled her eyes. "A small victory, considering everything that's happened." "Sometimes small victories are all we get," Declan said, "and they're enough to build on." 4 months later, the Aldridge Ranch was beginning to thrive again under new management. James, slowly recovering from the poison that had nearly killed him, had officially turned control over to Bridget. With Declan's guidance and the help of loyal ranch hands, she had begun to restore the property to its former prosperity. Thomas had indeed cooperated with the authorities, providing testimony that helped convict the remaining members of the Winters gang. In return, his own sentence had been reduced to 10 years in territorial prison, harsh, but not the hanging he might have faced. Martha visited him weekly, her love undiminished despite his crimes. James had gone once, a difficult reunion that had ended with cautious hope for eventual reconciliation. Bridget had not yet found it in her heart to face Thomas, though she knew the day would come when she must. On a crisp autumn afternoon, Bridget stood on the porch of the ranch house, watching Declan work with a young colt in the corral. In the months since the confrontation at the cabin, their relationship had deepened from tentative attraction to something much more profound. Declan had proven himself not just in crisis, but in the quiet everyday moments that followed, patient with her father, respectful of her authority on the ranch, and unfailingly supportive of her decisions. As if sensing her gaze, Declan looked up and smiled, that same smile that had first disarmed her at the train station. He secured the colt and strode toward the house, removing his hat as he approached. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, joining her on the porch. "I was thinking about how much has changed," Bridget replied. 4 months ago, I stepped off a train expecting to say goodbye to my father. Now I'm running a ranch and, Declan prompted when she trailed off. "And falling in love with a man who claimed he'd been waiting for me all along," she finished, a blush coloring her cheeks. Declan's smile widened. "Not just claiming anymore, I hope." "No," Bridget agreed softly. "I believe you now. It still seems fantastical that you would uproot your life based on a photograph and my father's stories. But then again, perhaps some connections transcend rational explanation. Like the connection that brought you home just when your family needed you most," Declan suggested. "Perhaps." Bridget touched the locket at her throat, her grandmother's locket, which now contained miniature portraits of both her father and Declan. Or perhaps it's simply that love, in all its forms, has a way of guiding us where we need to be. Declan took her hand, his expression growing serious. "Bridget, there's something I've been wanting to ask you," her heart quickened. "Yes. Your father gave me his blessing yesterday," Declan began, his voice betraying a rare nervousness, "to ask for your hand. I know it's only been a few months, and I would understand if you wanted more time," but Bridget silenced him with a finger to his lips. "Yes," she said simply. Declan blinked in surprise. "Yes, just like that. No conditions or considerations or, 'I've had enough drama for one lifetime,'" Bridget said with a laugh. "And enough separation from those I love. My answer is yes, Declan O'Malley, I will marry you." Joy illuminated his face as he swept her into his arms, lifting her off her feet in an exuberant embrace. When he set her down, his eyes were suspiciously bright. "I promised your father I'd take care of you," he said. "But the truth is, you're the strongest person I've ever known. It will be my privilege to stand beside you, whatever comes." "Whatever comes," Bridget echoed, sealing the promise with a kiss. From the doorway, James and Martha watched the young couple with matching smiles of approval. "You were right," Martha said softly to her husband. "He was worth waiting for. And she was worth coming home for," James agreed, his arm around his wife's shoulders. "Our lost girl found at last." As the sun set behind the distant mountains, casting golden light across the ranch that had nearly been lost to greed and betrayal, Bridget and Declan remained on the porch, planning their future. There would be challenges ahead: Thomas's eventual release, the ongoing management of 2 ranches, perhaps children someday. But whatever came, they would face it together. For Bridget, who had once fled west to find herself in the east, had finally found her true home in the arms of a man who had recognized her worth sight unseen. And Declan, who had followed an inexplicable pull across hundreds of miles, had found the woman he'd been waiting for all along. Her family had called her lost forever, but Declan had known better. He'd been waiting patiently for her return, certain that some connections, once formed, could never truly be broken, and he had been right.